The year is 2013. I am 9 years old, and I am really into comic book media. Watching a totally legally acquired MP4 of The Avengers was the pinnacle of my entertainment, and it was one of my gateways into Marvel. There were endless video games, books, and TV shows dedicated to this wonderful world. But however, I had a problem. I didn't quite know how to access the comics. If only I knew how good I had it. The closest comic book store was in the city, and finding other sources through the computer was out of the question, since my mum really didn't let me buy anything online, because I was 9 years old and I couldn't even access But one day, while I was shopping at Costco with my family, we came across the usual book aisle in the middle of the store. I loved reading at the time, so I decided to check out the book area, and what I found was the most magical thing to a comic deprived youth like me. A big book titled Marvel Character Encyclopedia. So I was able to get my family to buy it for me, and while I was reading it, I came across a certain character who piqued my interest. Captain Mar-Vell. Now that was a character I've never heard of before. Today's subject, my first video essay, is about the history of Marvel's first character to be called Captain Mar-Vell, and the legacy he left behind. The year is 1967. After the trademark for the Captain Mar-Vell name lapsed from Fawcett Comics, who shut down due to legal issues where Billy Batson was too much like Superman, Marvel Comics acquired the trademark, and debuted a character in Marvel Superheroes issue 12 called Mar-Vell, or Captain Mar-Vell. That's right, the character I'm doing this video on was legitimately only created just to hold the Captain Mar-Vell trademark. He was created by Stan Lee, who wasn't really thrilled with the idea of creating a character, sharing the name with another character from another company, and Gene Colan, who didn't actually have much involvement in the character's creation, and in particular had a hatred for the character and his costuming designed for him. So we're already off to a compelling start. When writing Mar-Vell, to distinguish him from the Fawcett character, Marvel gave him a more science fiction route to his stories, and even tied him into a pre-existing concept, the alien Kree race, which were created and featured in the Fantastic Four earlier that year. Anyways, Mar-Vell's first appearance is literally just him landing, checking out a botched missile launch, running from the military, and hiding on Earth. Average Tuesday for me. While not much happened in the issue, the main driving conflict is established between Captain Mar-Vell and his first enemy, Colonel Nor-Varr. The latter is jealous of the former because the ship's medic, Una, is in love with Mar-Vell, which Nor-Varr does not like one bit. Nor-Varr knowingly sent Mar-Vell on this mission, which was to investigate how a Kree sentry, which is a giant robot that the Kree use, was defeated on Earth, which happened in the early issue of Fantastic Four, knowing that Mar-Vell could possibly die there, and as a result, he deliberately sabotages as much of the mission as he can to make it look like an accident. It's actually a pretty interesting dynamic, where the two know about each other's goals and schemes, but they have to pretend they don't. Anyways, in the next issue, Stan Lee passed the writing duties onto Roy Thomas, who would actually write regularly for the character. Also in the same issue, following another assassination attempt from Nor-Varr, Mar-Vell gets a secret identity from a dead scientist guy who happened to be hit in an energy blast meant for Mar-Vell. Also for some reason, he looks a lot like him. This is contrivance number 1. You're going to be seeing a lot of those in those earlier stories, so you better get used to it. Anyways, our protagonist is going to Cape Canaveral, Florida, with the goal of seeing and studying the Earth's progress with space travel. He then meets the security chief, Carol Danvers, whose main thing at this story is being suspicious of Walter Larson, but swoons over Captain Mar-Vell. She will definitely not be important to the Marvel Universe as a whole later. Then we have contrivance number 2, with the Kree sentry being sent to Cape Canaveral, Florida for study. To make a long story short, the sentry reactivates, thanks to Nor-Varr being a dick. And Mar-Vell, who's struggling mentally with his mission, decides to go against his people in order to protect any innocents who could be hurt by the sentry. To make a long story short, Mar-Vell beats the robot, which causes onlookers who have misheard his name, which is spoken by the sentry, deem him Captain Mar-Vell. So your average day in Florida just happened. After that introduction, Mar-Vell begins a superhero career, facing threats like the Super Skrull, Namor, the Metazoid, Solam, Quasimodo, the creatively named Organization, and the Acorn race, while wrestling with his inner struggles on if he should remain loyal to the Kree Empire or defend the innocence of Earth. It actually sounds pretty compelling, but most of that juicy drama is overlooked in his early appearances. I'm gonna be real with you all, a lot of his earlier stories are kinda boring to me, but they do have this old science fiction serial charm as well. However, when Arnold Drake took over writing duties from Roy Thomas, they later felt more like standard superhero stuff to me. Each issue is also both self-contained and has a long-running narrative at the same time. It's a pretty fascinating writing structure to me. I think that should be used a bit more. Also, a brief thing I noticed is that the comic keeps calling him young, even though he looks like he's in his 40s. Maybe it's the white hair, but in his early appearances, that man does not look young to me at all. Eventually, after disobeying orders several times from Nor-Varr, which would have killed innocent people who did nothing, Mar-Vell was found guilty of treason against the Kree Empire and was to be executed by a firing squad. But, to make a long story short, the Acorn interfere, Mar-Vell survives, Una doesn't, and he encounters a godlike being, who grants him powers for revenge against Nor-Varr, except not really, because it was tricked by Ronan the Accuser, and some guy called Zarek, as part of a plot to overthrow the Kree Emperor, the Supreme Intelligence, who's basically a big head in a jar. As you can tell, that portion of the book was written by 3 different people, so in retrospect it would have been weird if it wasn't a mess at all. After that mess, the Supreme Intelligence gave him his more iconic outfit, designed by Gil Kane. It's not complete yet. Also, as soon as he started to return to Earth, he suddenly became trapped in the Negative Zone, which is a universe in Marvel made out of antimatter, ruled by a bug guy called Annihilus but unformed. He'll be really important later. It was a struggle to keep being invested for the second half of Mar-Vell's early adventures, which I call the Zoe stories, because they felt really disjointed, and upon doing research for this essay, unsurprisingly, a lot of people felt the same way. Something needed to change, and so in issue 7 of Mar-Vell's title, it did just that. With Roy Thomas back in writing duties, we start this next portion of Mar-Vell's journey off, with him trapped in the Negative Zone, with no possible way or hope getting out. Things are looking bad, but then the Supreme Intelligence enables our hero to telepathically make contact with an unlikely ally. Enter Rick Jones. So for the Hulk's origin, you might recall Bruce Banner helping some guy who snuck on the nuclear testing area, just because he was told he had no balls. So he's pretty much one of the catalysts for the creation of the Hulk. But after that, Mar-Vell didn't just really know what to do with him. He was around books. At one point he accidentally formed the Avengers while calling the Fantastic Four for help. He even became the new Bucky for a bit, but then after being rejected by a Red Skull-possessed Captain America, he decided to resign from the Avengers, but then he gets a strange urge to go in the middle of nowhere, so basically a day in the life of me. Once he arrives, he finds 2 golden armbands. This is obviously a ripoff of how Billy Batson became Captain Mar-Vell back in Fawcett's books, and this was more science fiction based, so it's alright or something. Anyways, Mar-Vell was finally able to confront Nor-Varr, who was holding Carol Danvers as a hostage. They fight, and then Mar-Vell wins, saves Carol, who's bombarded with energy from the machine called the Psyche Magnetron. This will definitely not be important later. Also at this point, Mar-Vell left Nor-Varr for dead, so he's out of the story forever. After that, Rick and Mar-Vell go from several adventures, including being trapped in the 70s equivalent of a Mr. Beast challenge, fighting the Hulk, fighting some more generic bad guys, and most importantly, being a key player in the Kree-Skrull War. Essentially what happened is that after a bunch of bullshit which resulted in Rick Jones being free from the Negative Zone, Ronan the Accuser taking command of the Kree Sentry from all the way back reactivating, the Kree de-evolution experiments in the Arctic, a group known as the Alien Activities Commission formed because of that adventure, along with the various alien encounters on Earth that had happened. The head center of that group, H. Warren Craddock, wanted Mar-Vell captured, and the Avengers said no. So Mar-Vell and Carol Danvers escaped from a wild chase and went to a private farm to stay until things blew over. She tries to get our hero to build an Omni-Wave projector, which is normally a communication device, but also can be a deadly weapon for some reason. But he sees through her deception because she was Super Skrull the whole time, so the Kree-Skrull War predicted data from Discord. Mar-Vell was then captured along with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and they're taken to the Skrull throne world, where Mar-Vell is forced to build another Omniwave projector or else the siblings will be executed by the Skrulls. To make a long story short, after some bullshit with the humans, the Avengers arrive, fighting happens, the Captain of Supreme Intelligence sends Rick Jones into the Negative Zone, which somehow unlocks some bullshit in Rick called the Destiny Force, which can alter reality. He stops time, helps end the war, and win the day. But Rick was also close to death, so Mar-Vell somehow refuses with him and is assumed to be dead. Also, it turns out that the H1 Craddock of the Alien Activities Commission was a Skrull who replaced the original, who then got brutally killed by an angry mob, so all's well that ends well. The Kree-Skrull War was in the first major crossover events in Marvel, and despite how silly it could be, it laid the groundwork for many stories to come, and the mythology is still being felt for Marvel world building to this very day. The story may be rough in some edges, particularly the prologue, and a lot of time is spent in areas longer than others, particularly with Hank Pym fixing Vision and the whole Inhuman story randomly sandwiched in between. But overall, it's very charming and interesting to see where a whole bunch of the Marvel staples originated from. After all of that, the duo would find themselves in arguably one of the most important adventures or encounters yet: Thanos, the Mad Titan. While I enjoy those adventures more than the Zoe stories, the next major ones, which writer Jim Starlin worked on, really gravitated me towards the character. At the time, he watched a show called Kung Fu, which saw its protagonist go through a spiritual journey, so Jim decided he'd do something like that, but on a cosmic scale. Starting in a random issue of Iron Man, Starlin and fellow writer Mike Frederich have been slowly building a story arc where Thanos would seek the Cosmic Cube, which is not the Tesseract, but is rather an item which can alter reality, while Mar-Vell, who's alive by the way, was dealing with some things involving the Super Skrull and the Thing. He was suddenly teleported to the presence of an extra-dimensional being known as Eon. He then took over plotting the following issue, and he got Mar-Vell to go through a spiritual journey with a being known as Eon, which resulted in him fully rejecting the warlike nature of the Kree, and as a result gave him blonde hair, which in my opinion made his costume look way better, the title Protector of the Universe, and something called Cosmic Awareness, which is essentially omniscience, meaning that he can now learn information like from anywhere really fast. With that, along with help from the Avengers, Drax and Thanos' dad and scumbag brother, Mar-Vell was able to defeat the Controller, who was there I guess, defeat Thanos' forces, and shatter the Cosmic Cube, foiling his scheme. Also, at one point in the story, Thanos almost ascended to godhood. I don't know where else to put this in the script, so I'm just leaving it there. Like the Kree before it, the saga was pivotal to the Marvel lore, because it introduced characters like Thanos and Drax, expanded on the Marvel cosmic lore like the Cosmic Cube stuff, but my problem with it is that half of it spends more time with the Controller as the antagonist than it does with Thanos, and does go longer than it should be, but overall I still think it's a solid arc. Also, side note, but I just love that the scene when the Avengers were attacked by their base by an enemy who they assumed was Thanos, but was actually the Controller, who just happened to share a silhouette, which I found fucking hilarious. After all of that, Starlin left just one issue after the Thanos War because he had an issue of the Incas or something, and his Mar-Vell stories as a result started to get lower in stakes with the rotating creative teams that have popped in every now and then. Something to note in particular of that issue is that he fought a villain called Nitro, who had the ability to blow himself up but reform, who forced him to be exposed to some gases in order to save some people. And he'll never be important again. After that, he then learns that he was selected for the Earth mission for an extremely complex reason, which involved a plant called the Millennia Balloon, and is the reason why Reed and Rick Jones had to swap places in the Negative Zone in order to give the Supreme Intelligence supersonic powers with a link or something. I didn't really care for that, so yeah. After something with the Super Adaptoid, he's eventually able to unfuse with Rick Jones in the Negative Zone permanently. He then fights against a sentient computer who was reprogrammed by Thanos called Isaac. Isaac was created by Mentor, Thanos' father, for the purpose of controlling the artificial environment of the planet Titan, amongst other services for the Titanium Eternals. Thanos then reprogrammed it for evil. He also meets his new love, Ulysses, who he convinced to defect from Isaac, who was then defeated and reprogrammed for his usual purposes. Also, in one issue, Mar-Vell and Rick Jones are melts for some reason. I find that kind of funny, not gonna lie. But now, all good things must come to an end, including a life of a hero. So Mar-Vell finds out that he has cancer from Nitro's gas, and he accepts his fate. The Negabands which Mar-Vell used for so long have mutated the cancer, causing it to resist all forms of treatment. Well, fuck. The many friends and foes he made on Earth show up to pay their respects. but surprisingly, even his sworn enemies, the Skrulls, honor him by sending a general of theirs to gift him the Skrull Medal of Valor. Which is nice and all, but what do his species, the Kree, do for him? Nothing! What a bunch of assholes. As he prepares for death, Mar-Vell gets an illusion from death itself and Thanos. It's a battle with him and all his past enemies, so he could die fighting instead of in bed. And so, the door tragically but beautifully closes on such an underrated character's life. The death of Captain Mar-Vell was a story made to retire Mar-Vell, who the company found wasn't really able to be interesting, which is because of the stories he was regularly in were not that exciting, which I agree with because the post-Thanos stories weren't really that notable for me. Jim Starlin came back for Marvel graphic novel issue 1, which was where Mar-Vell died, and he did it as a means of coping with his father's death. And upon reading this emotionally rich story, you can definitely see and feel it. It's a beautifully written tale about a man and his allies coming to terms with his death. There's a lot of interesting themes and parallels in the death of Captain Mar-Vell, such as it being a commentary on the comic book genre, in particular showing his situation in contrast of Drax, who died and came back to life in an earlier story. It also realistically shows him losing weight, which is signaling that he's not coming back like usual. It is probably one of the biggest impacts Mar-Vell had in the comics landscape as a whole, his death. But another impact he's had is that his legacy lives on in various ways. So Mar-Vell's dead now. Where to next? He obviously hasn't appeared too often since the death of Captain Mar-Vell for obvious reasons, but he did have a few series set before he went to Earth where he fought the Brood and the Shi'ar Empire from the X-Men books. But in terms of other appearances, he did get resurrected 2 times. The first time was during Chaos War in 2013, which was an event where several dead characters were brought back to the Greek god Hades using his army against the dead as part of an all-out attack against the Japanese god. He fought valiantly with the other deceased Avengers, but he died again when the racist supervillain Grim Reaper impaled him. Bummer. His second resurrection happened during Avengers vs X-Men, where the Kree used the M-Crown Crystal, another X-Men MacGuffin, don't worry about it, to bring him back to protect their race from the Phoenix Force. After some brainwashing was undone, he then sacrificed himself again to save the race, which spared him on his deathbed, and his corpse, which had some Phoenix energy left in it, grew some plant life on a desert planet he happened to land on. But in terms of legacy, there's actually quite a lot to cover. Do you remember Carol Danvers? It turns out she got her powers from the Psyche Magnetron which blew up, and she started her career as Miss Marvel, and she was doing pretty well for a while until an encounter with Rogue depowered her. To make a really long story short, eventually she got her powers back, and after a lot of things happening, she then graduated to the Captain Mar-Vell role, and yeah, I'm actually really happy for her. But before all of that, there was a second Captain Mar-Vell, actually nothing to do with Mar-Vell at all. You all know probably who I'm talking about since you've seen the MCU, but I'm just gonna say her anyways. Enter Monica Rambau. She was the first female character to bear the Captain Mar-Vell title. She was a police captain who constantly got screwed over for promotions because of her race and gender. So when a scientist friend of her late grandfather asked for help in retrieving an energy-draining device from a rogue assistant of his, she jumped at the opportunity. As per usual, things didn't go to plan, so Rambau did the sensible thing and attempted to destroy the machine with her bare hands. It exploded, as these devices do, and it gave her electromagnetic/energy-based powers. She got the name from a traumatized bad guy who kept saying, "The Captain is a Marvel." She joined and eventually became leader of the Avengers, and she was present for the Secret Wars event. Unfortunately, it was not to last, and she was regrettably depowered and shafted for many years. Eventually, when she did come back, she had to change her name to Photon, later to Pulsar, and then Spectrum. Recently, she's gone back to calling herself Photon, and is currently part of the Avengers team, which is nice. If you want more information on her, I'd recommend Comic Drake's video, which I'm going to leave in the link below. Also, I know it technically doesn't count, but the Cosmic Hero Quasar uses bands similar to the Nega Band, known as the Quantum Bands. At some point he's contacted by Eon, who gave him Mar-Vell's old job as the protector of the universe. I really like Quasar, but I'll reserve more information for him in his own video in the future once I get around to it. But you may be wondering, Farlow, is there any actual characters semi-related to Mar-Vell and his legacy? Well, for that I raised the third Captain Mar-Vell. Enter Genus Vell. He was born and genetically created from Mar-Vell's DNA by Ulysses, Mar-Vell's lover from earlier. He lived in an isolated planet called Praxis, and they were safe there for a while. Eventually he left there and went on some space adventures. He even bonded with Rick Jones like his father did, but instead of going like in the negative zone, Rick was in the microverse. It also awakened Genis's latent cosmic awareness that he had, for some reason. Eventually, after some adventures, Genis went insane, destroyed the universe, and recreated it, and also creating sisterhood Violet in the process, but we'll get to in a bit. Anyways, he separated from Rick, had some more adventures, joined the Thunderbolts, died, and recently came back to life. I haven't really read much of Genis-Vell, but he seems like a pretty complex character. Maybe after I read some more of its adventures, I'll give him his own video in the future. Anyways, onto Violet. She has a similar origin to her brother, being genetically created. However, it wasn't until Annihilation where she really came to prominence. She started a relationship with fellow cosmic heroine Moondragon, became the new Quasar, became like Marta, who's like the avatar like of Oblivion, who's the basically abstract cosmic entity who's the embodiment of nothing, Unfortunately, her story does not have a happy ending. After finding a cosmic entity called the Magus, who's actually a future evil version of Alan Warlock, she accidentally revived Thanos and he killed her. Oopsie daisy. Currently, the Violet running around in 616 is an alternate universe version of her, whose original universe was dying, so she and her wife Moondragon went to the 616 universe. And one last success of the day, Hulkling. This may be surprising to some people who don't read comics. How could this young Avenger be related to Mar-Vell? Well, actually, he's a Skrull hybrid, conceived after Mar-Vell and the Skrull Princess are now banged during the Rick Jones Destiny Force time stop thing. Hulkling did well for a while as a hero, helping out the Young Avengers during the Secret Invasion and the Children's Crusade, amongst many other solo stuff I haven't really have time to discuss. Eventually, thanks to his dual heritage, he joined the Kree-Skrull Alliance, who formed over a common enemy, the plant-based Katai. Eventually, Teddy became king of the Alliance, and he married his boyfriend Wiccan. I'm happy for them. If it seems like I'm speedrunning through these characters, it's actually because I am. This video is already going as long as I can make it, and I feel like all these characters deserve their own videos in the future. So if you're interested, let me know if you want me to cover any of them in the comment section below. And there we have it, the tale of our character who was only created for legal reasons, a character who regularly had his title counted and restarted, a character who had not much people cared about until after his death. It was able to leave behind such an important and integral legacy for the Marvel Universe, which is still being felt to this day. Throughout his life, Mar-Vell went through a lot, basically being trapped between a war raged by two violent races, basically being punished by his race for caring about others, seeing his loved ones die over and over again, but throughout it all, he never gave up on his compassion. His spirit persevered, and despite being an alien, his humanity shined through. Even though he eventually passed away, he did it surrounded by his many allies and loved ones on Earth. He came to show that even in death, an alien was truly the most human out of everyone. And that is the story of Captain Mar-Vell. I've been working on this video for 2 years now, not because it's high effort, but because I've been very lazy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I got many other video ideas, and I love to really make them all. Anyways, I'm gonna play Marvel Rivals now. See you all next month!